Live from Seville, this is The Twilight Show with Harry Waters, and you are listening live.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning. It could be morning somewhere, I guess. It probably isn't, though. How are you all today? I trust you're well. I trust you've been well. I can see my guest has just entered the studio, which is fantastic news. It's certainly a good start. And the audios are also working, so that's 2 thumbs up for my anti-penultimate show, which is pretty exciting. So what has happened since we last spoke? Quite a lot's happened, to be honest. I've been to some places and I've done some things. How about yourselves? I hope you've been having fun. In fact, I've spoken to our guest today on 3 or 4 occasions since I was last on. So that's been cool for me anyway. Probably not as much for her, as she's had to put up with quite a lot of my nonsense. I also went to Paris for Change Now Climate Summit, which was super exciting. I got to meet lots of really fun people and super energized by the solutions that were proposed at Change Now. There have been a lesson or 2 of renewable English. The next one, of course, is coming up on Friday, which is all about the art of change making, where we look into how art can inspire change. There are many ways in which art can inspire change, obviously. And what is art anyway? Another big question, probably one that's a little bit too big to squeeze into the first 5 minutes of this episode. And there was also the very sad news, well, sad for me anyway, that this is the anti-penultimate, as I mentioned, show of the Wednesday Twilight Show with Harry. So there is this show, and then there are 2 more coming out next week on the 14th and then on the 21st. And then it will be, at least for now, bye-bye from Harry, because I just don't feel like I've got enough in me anymore. I'm running on empty. So luckily, I've got 3 more wonderful shows lined up for you. They're going to be the 3 best shows ever, without a shadow, ever made on any radio station ever by anyone. That's a fact. It's a guaranteed fact. Nobody can deny it. Nobody can argue otherwise, or I'll be very cross with them. So we do have 3 wonderful shows lined up, but it is very sad because Teachers Talk Radio has been really special to me, and it was a very difficult decision to come to. I messaged the big man, Mr. Tom Rogers, and said that this would happen. It's been over 2 years since my first ever show, which was a trial show that I did with Charlie from Charlie's Lessons. I was terrified. The audios didn't work very well. I couldn't figure out how to make it work, and things just kept going wrong, and I had no idea what to do. And what's changed since then? Well, now I'm still incredibly nervous before every show. Quite often the audios don't work. But now I try and find ways to get around it and ways to avoid it. I guess that's the thing that I've learned a lot, and it's given me that confidence. And on a very selfish level, I have learned so much over these 80 or so episodes. That's about 120 hours of Teachers Talk Radio, which I guess is kind of like a CELTA course. So I now have the equivalent of a CELTA course, but in Teachers Talk Radio, which isn't a thing, but maybe I should make a certificate. Because whenever you go into a webinar, the first thing anybody says is, do I get a certificate for this or any kind of training session? So I think I'm going to make myself a certificate for 120 hours completed on Teachers Talk Radio. And I might put it on my CV. Does anyone have a CV anymore? I don't have a CV. I just tell people to look at LinkedIn. That's pretty much my go-to CV. But it's been wonderful. It's been amazing to speak to over 60 guests and learn about so many different things, not only about ELT, also beyond ELT. I've learned about music and poetry and A list as long as your arm, as long as you've got very long arms, that is. So I've got long arms, so a list as long as my arm, at least. It has been a wonderful experience. It's been a wonderful journey, but the journey isn't over yet. So do not fear. The journey will continue, and it will continue very shortly. We're just going to listen to the news, and we will continue as soon as we're back from the news. So we will hear you very shortly.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Guardian covers news about the downturn in the numbers of pupils choosing languages and creative arts subjects at GCSE and A-level. The article quotes provisional figures for England, which suggests the exam entries for languages such as German, French and Spanish have fallen at A-level by as much as 17%. GCSE entries have stayed broadly the same. The article goes on to contrast this with the rise in A-level entries for computing by 15% on last year and a 12% increase at GCSE. Business studies is also increasingly popular at GCSE. Data from Ofqual suggests that entries for A-level and GCSEs are on the rise, but that not all subjects are seeing the benefit. Performing arts subjects are also seeing a reduction in numbers at A-level and GCSE, as are those in the area of art and design. The move to more vocational style subjects has been welcomed by some, but has caused others to worry about the loss of creativity for the next generation. Schools Week reports on Capita, the outsourcing company paid to run SATs, and its decision to increase workload for those it employs to mark. Technical issues have already caused a delay to marking, with some not able to access necessary training. Now teachers say the rates they are paid are also being slashed. Rate cards show how those marking some SATs papers could receive as little as 2p per segment, down from 6p last year. And whilst the overall fee this year is likely to be similar to last, the number of responses markers are expected to mark has increased by over 50%. It is feared that this could lead to rushed marking, which may then lead to errors. Some critics also predict teachers walking away, leaving a backlog of unmarked tests. The deadline to return marks to schools is in July. TES reveals the names of those appointed to the expert panel to review relationships and sex education, known as RSE, and the health education curriculum. The guidance will be published for consultation in the autumn. The 5 members of the panel were appointed after Education Secretary Gillian Keegan wrote to schools in March to ensure they were complying with their legal obligations to publish their RSE approach and share curriculum materials with parents. The government has been criticised for taking too long to issue guidance, amid concerns schools and teachers felt left in limbo. The panel members are Professor Dame Leslie Regan, Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology and Women's Health Ambassador, Sir Hamid Patel, CEO of Star Academies, Helena Brothwell, Regional Director of School Improvement for David Ross Academies Trust, and Alistair Henderson, a barrister specialising public law, human rights and equality law. The final panel member is Isabel Trowler, Chief Social Worker for Children and Families in England. Finally, vaping continues to make the news, with ministers stating they want schools to be part of the crackdown. The Chief Medical Officer for England, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, however, probably summed up the key messages best in an article for The Times. He said, "If you smoke, vaping is much safer. If you don't smoke, don't vape." He goes on to say that companies trying to addict children for profit are behaving in a shameful way, because we do not know the long-term effects of many vape ingredients. The government also announced that the issue of vaping would be added to its review of our SHE curriculum. However, some have already criticised the information provided by government so far as lacking depth and detail. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm going to take a look at report writing. I'll ask the burning question, can ChatGPT write my school reports? Yes, I know there are other AIs out there, but this is the most well known. Before I start, just give me a yes or no in your head. Will it be able to? So, first up, I blatantly asked it, can you write school reports? And ChatGPT said, certainly, I can help you write a school report. Please provide me with the topic or subject of the report, along with any specific guidelines or requirements you have been given. Additionally, provide me with any relevant information or key points you'd like me to include in the report. Okay then. I said, James is good at history and weaker in maths than English. This generated a 961-word report. Here is the opening paragraph. In this report, we will explore James's academic strengths and areas for improvement in different subjects. James demonstrates a strong aptitude for history while he faces challenges in mathematics when compared to his proficiency in English. In conclusion, James exhibits a strong aptitude for history, showcasing a profound understanding of historical concepts and critical thinking skills. His performance in English is commendable, with excellent written and verbal communication skills. However, James faces challenges in mathematics, particularly in problem solving and advanced mathematical reasoning. By providing him with the necessary support, encouragement and resources, we can help James strengthen his mathematical abilities and achieve a more balanced academic profile. Oh wow. Right, so what if I get even lazier? I typed, write a primary school report for Tom. This produced a 477-word report covering English, maths, science, social studies, personal and social development, resilience and perseverance, responsibility and organisation, finishing with an area for development being handwriting. ChatGPT doesn't half know what Tom is like. My conclusion, given enough information, it could give you a decent report. However, it'd work best as a proofreader/tidier-upper. Give it a brief report and ask it to make it look more professional, or ask it to write the same report in 5 different ways. Letting ChatGPT give you the vocabulary will save you time. Just remember that it uses American spellings. Quite frankly, I was quite blown away by what was produced. This is definitely a time saver when you're trying to say the same thing in different ways. Do you use AI to help you with anything? Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Thank you, Steve. The dreaded report writing. Oh, don't we just love it? So I am now going to introduce my guest. We will talk a bit about reports, but we'll talk about a lot of other things first. I do have the wonderful Nikki Partridge here with me. Hello, Nikki. How are you?
Hello, Harry. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here in the radio domain. So before we do continue and talk a bit about you, reports, how do you feel about report writing?
Oh, so first of all, let me just say thank you so much for inviting me here. We've seen each other
It's a pleasure.
quite a little bit over the last few weeks. And this is a real pleasure for me to, I'm a big fan of the show. So to be able to join you in one of your last 3 ever episodes is a real professional honor. So thank you very much. Report writing, yes. How do I feel about report writing? Well, of course, I'm a teacher at essence. So report writing is always, it's a bit of an onerous task, especially, for example, during our summer schools where we maybe have as many as 80 reports at a time to write about kids that we don't know a huge amount about because we've only had them for a very short period of time. I'm quite interested to explore ChatGPT a little bit more. I was quite interested as well to hear that recent report because I think I have used it a little bit myself for some of the very bespoke lessons that I deliver. And it is a really great way of getting some topic specific vocabulary easily, which you can then tweak. But yeah, it's certainly not a complete off the shelf solution. So yeah, sorry, a little bit about reports, a little bit about ChatGPT.
Well, I did see that it had translated a lot of climate vocabulary into about 400 different languages. So
Oh wow!
of course, there are massive benefits. I have issues with reports. I love reports, to be honest. I know they are very onerous, but when you know the students, I find it's incredibly useful to actually write something about them, what they've done, where they've come from, how they've progressed, particularly in language learning. It's very obvious. You can see their improvement arc. It's very obvious to me anyway, and I quite like writing the reports and saying how they've done. But then I have 16 students this year. It isn't quite like when I had, I was teaching 5 different levels in school, and I had to write for all of those. But in Spain, reports are just numbers. You only write a comment if the student has any kind of issue, but teachers just decide students don't have issues. So here you just get a list of 10 numbers, which is great for me at the end of the year to see that my daughter's progress is a list of numbers. And so what can I get from that? Absolutely nothing. Where's she improved? What does she need to work on? How does she behave in class? Oh, that's all included in the number. Oh, that's good. Thank you. It shows me her effort. It shows me her attainment. It shows me her social skills. It shows me her critical thinking, all in one number. Well, very useful. I'd like to see a breakdown. But anyway, let's not get sidelined by the Spanish education system, because I fear that the hour and a half would disappear in no time, and nobody would have a chance to get to know you. So, Nikki, I know you a bit. I don't know you a lot. I feel like I know you quite a bit. We've connected a lot recently, which has been lovely. But I don't know where you came from and how you got to where you are. I feel like starting to sing Cotton Eye Joe there. Where did you come from? Where did you go? I'm not going to do that. So where did you come from, and how did you get to where you are, and where are you?
Okay, so I came from the place where I still come from, and the place where I am at the moment, which is Cardiff, the capital of Wales, which I'm sure people will pick up fairly quickly from my accent, which, although is fairly neutral, can get very Welsh from time to time. So so that's where I'm from. Basically, I left Wales to study at university in Southampton. And I also studied at the University of Granada in Spain, not a million miles away from where you are now, Harry, I believe. So I'm also a big fan of Andalusia in general. So I studied languages and politics. I had absolutely zero intention of becoming a teacher because I actually wanted to be the next Alanis Morissette. So I started off my kind of early professional life as a would-be singer-songwriter. And when I finished uni, I did do a very brief stint at a summer school in Cambridge, but that was just to earn a few pennies to be able to go off to traveling around New Zealand for a bit. But that was very much a sort of, I can speak a few languages. What could I do in those bad old days? They didn't ask for any qualifications or any form of safeguarding or anything like that. So it was just a case of turn up in my, what was then, I think it was a little Volkswagen Polo, and teach a load of kids. So I did that for a couple of months, and I quite enjoyed it, but I had absolutely no intention of becoming a teacher. It just wasn't on my radar at all, because as I said, all I wanted to be was, Alanis or Lisa Loeb or, somebody, some sort of late 90s singer-songwriter like that. So I moved back to Cardiff with my guitar, sort of Julie Andrews style, swinging it around, and rented a house, and basically decided to get the most boring job that I could find, because I thought that if I had a very, very boring job, which was actually got a job matching post. So this was sort of before email really took off, because we're talking about a little while ago. So I'm not going to say exactly how long ago, because I've already said late 90s, early 2000s. So that should set the scene. But basically, I took the most boring job, which was post matching for an insurance company. So all the worlds of boring, which involved opening letters and stamping the post and matching them to their relevant client file. And that's what I
Oh
did for about a
wow,
year.
that
Yeah.
sounds so dull.
Yeah, it was mind numbing beyond belief. But this was kind of part of my strategy, because I thought, well, surely if I'm that bored for 8 hours a day, the muses will come to me in the evenings and on the weekends, and then I'll feel very inspired to go out and perform as much music as I could in my free time. But as I said, after about a year, I actually found that wasn't really working for me. And I needed to be doing something different during the day, at least something remotely intellectually stimulating, to be able to sort of, explore the music. But I didn't really know what to do. I had literally no idea. I decided not to go for any graduate schemes, anything like that. I never wanted to be a cog in a wheel. It was never something that I wanted to do. So I sort of thought, what have I ever done that I enjoyed? And this summer camp came back to me. And I sort of thought, well, actually, I really enjoyed being around all those kids, and I really enjoyed being around the English language. And I started to dig into it in a bit more detail. And I actually got a job, a second job, a side hustle, in addition to my music side hustle, working for a company in Cardiff. And they'd won a contract to teach nurses from the Philippines. And so I became a teaching assistant. And as part of that role, I was actually an assistant to a person who's become my real inspiration in TEFL, who's a lady called Dr. Rhian Webb from the University of South Wales, who I'll come on to talk about a little bit more later, because we're still very much professionally involved. And basically, I was Rhian's assistant, and she just inspired me to get involved in TEFL. And I thought, So I thought, well, I better get some qualifications. So I went out and got some qualifications, got a job working for Cardiff Council, teaching mainly asylum seekers and refugees. I did that for about 4 years, and various other outreach kind of programs. Mainly with a lot of groups of ladies. So I had a lot of ladies only classes. And it was a real sort of baptism of fire into the world of EFL, because, teaching in any of those sorts of ESOL situations is very loaded with a lot of other kind of, issues that the students have, which we weren't prepared for at all.
Yeah, it's not just, you're not just teaching language, but I mean,
Oh,
we're
no.
not just teaching language anyway, but
No.
it's when it comes to people with very specific traumas to them, there's a lot of, I don't want to call it baggage, because I don't want to trivialize it, but a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little nod as well to this year's IATEFL. There was an amazing plenary one of the days by a lady, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but who works in a large ESOL center in New York. And it was all about that very topic, how teaching English is probably the least important thing that you do in an ESOL classroom, because there's so much more involved than that. So I did that for 4 years. And then after about 4 years, I got a real bug for teaching for the English language industry. And I decided to set up my own little school because I could see that there was a bit of a gap in the market. So for the first year, I opened Pear Tree very organically. I know organic is your style as well, Harry, so we've probably got a bit in common there. So I said, I'm going to open a school with a little bit of naivety looking back, but that's what I did. And
you got to have naivety, otherwise you can't discover anything new. And I do want to just give a quick nod to the name. I love it. I love the name.
Thank you.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, that was probably one of the first things I noticed when we first connected a little while back. I was like, Nicky Partridge from Pear Tree. I was like, oh. Whoa, that's clever. That's good. Because I used to have a friend called Ian Partridge, and we used to wind him up by calling him Pear Tree. Definitely wasn't bullying.
No.
Although now looking back at it, it probably actually was. No, he didn't mind. He joined in with it. But again, probably wasn't a very nice thing to do. So yeah, I love the name. I think it's a brilliant name. Fantastic.
Oh, thanks, Harry. It's been a wonderful talking point over the years, and it's great. It's a really nice way as well to talk to students, about things like Christmas traditions, and it's just a really nice sort of small talk little gambit. So yeah, so basically that was it for the first few years. Sort of still working in the ESOL world, still working in the pear tree world, and then after about sort of 4 or 5 years of doing that, I thought, okay, so now we should probably get properly serious, which is when I decided to go for British Council accreditation, and yeah, and that's when I suppose it really became a fully fledged school, obviously under the rules of the Accreditation UK. And that's when it sort of really started to build as well as a business. And that was very much the kind of the road that we were on pretty much up until 2020, March the 20th, 2020.
Wonder what
could have
happened
on
then.
that day? Yeah,
It was 4 days before my birthday. That's what happened.
That is actually my birthday.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
You share a birthday with Paul Merson, the
Yeah.
ex-Arsenal footballer.
Oh
There you
gosh,
go.
I'm afraid football is something I know nothing about. So
Oh,
yeah.
I don't care particularly about it, but birthdays stick in my head, so I won't forget your birthday.
There we are. Yeah. So yes, that was a nice present. So basically, yeah, up to that point, we'd become a pretty thriving, still local, still independent language academy. So adult students year round. Very personal. Really great student relationships, and I'd built up a really good summer school as well, junior summer school that was running year after year after year. And then of course COVID hit, and boom, it was all sort of gone. Pretty much overnight. I mean, we didn't realize it was in a flash. Yeah, in a flash. Yeah, so that happened, and I was very, very lucky that I had an amazing team around me, and I just would like to give a huge shout out to the guy who was the director of studies at the time, and a few other key staff members that were all very proactive, and all of us just said straight away, right, what can we do? And this is the sort of the start of probably where partnerships come into it, because we sort of immediately said, well, we want to keep in touch with our students. There's this thing called Zoom. And we'd always done a bit of online teaching, a bit of Skype, this kind of thing, but we'd never really embraced Zoom or large scale online sessions or anything like that. So we said, well, why don't we start doing some socials on Zoom? Within about 2 weeks, that turned into, and we invited everybody. So we just put these open links out there, which was a little bit of a risk, but we said students, present, past, even if you just want to learn a bit of English, it's completely free. Just jump online and come and do these socials with us. So that went on for a couple of weeks. And after a couple of weeks, we then decided, well, let's do this thing called webinars, because also that was kind of a webinar. That was kind of a new concept at the time. But what is that? So I watched a load of them. And then we started to sort of set topics. And then within about a month, we caught the attention of the University of South Wales, and my old mentor, Dr. Rian, came on board because she was just super curious and is a very proactive person, and said, well, can I be involved? And so we did that for about 6 months, and it became really, really, really very well thought out. Sometimes we were topping the Zoom room, so more than 100 people, they were trying to get in, and we were saying, no, you cannot join.
Get out.
Get out. Come back next week. And it was just going really well. So Rian actually decided to see if there was something they could do from the University of South Wales. They sponsored the webinars, and then we started to work on them in partnership. So this was the first of the partnerships. And then, to cut a long story short, just to finish that kind of University of South Wales side of it off, we actually ran it in the end until December of 2021. We did over 70 webinars, and Rian and I gave a talk on it at IATEFL Belfast, which was then published in the conference selections paper. And we did a whole piece of research about what learning outcomes are achievable in different formats like multi-level breakout rooms. If you can achieve, realistic learning outcomes in this kind of scenario where it's literally like everyone is welcome, and how to get proper communicative practice into webinars, etc., etc. So that's what all of that was about. And yeah, working in this kind of partnership. And we also trained TESOL students from the University of South Wales to be our facilitators in the webinars. So this got us really, a real sort of interest in the teacher training side of things, which is something that we'd never done before either, because we'd been this very traditional language academy. So I just found that this kind of working in partnership with another organization was just transformative for me as a professional, and I started to learn all kinds of new skills, meet all sorts of different people. And after what had then been about 18 years of kind of, sailing my own ship with a very good crew, but still kind of sailing it myself, being in these partnerships was like somebody turning all the lights on. And it suddenly felt
that's
like the
cool.
world became huge. So I suddenly felt like, okay, we are not just this, we are a nice local language academy in Cardiff, but we can also be, a real sort of presence on a much, much, much wider scale, access many, many, many more people. And then I started to realize that, wow, what you can achieve with this access to so many people, what kind of difference you can make in their lives, and how much knowledge can be transferred, and how it's really like a two-way street as well. You're learning, they're learning. And yes, so we've had this technology for a long time, but I think it wasn't really until COVID, at least in the case of Pear Tree, forced us into that space, that we really realized how much potential there was with it.
It was very much like a, to quote Ross from Friends, pivot. Suddenly everyone was just like, what do we do now? Well, let's pivot, and it turned into one of those sink or swim moments where, like, for me, I'd done a fair bit of teaching online, training online. I'd done webinars before COVID. I knew how to use Zoom, which was pretty cool because I'd used it in a few webinars that I'd done. I knew how to use breakout rooms because I had used them once or twice beforehand. But suddenly the company I was working for were like, oh, you know how to do that, so you can do loads of webinars on training people how to do that. I was like, well, okay. I mean, I have 2.5 hours experience in doing it, which is 2.5 hours more than most people. But yeah, so I did quite a lot of work on that with, training on. I did a talk called Zooming Around, which is just a whole bunch of games that you could use with Zoom that could be adapted to low-level, high-level kids, adults. The kind of thing I always do with trying to be as practical as possible with my ideas. So, yeah, for me as well, that sudden switch to online, it opened my eyes, and yeah, it opened a lot of doors as well. Particularly when it comes to renewable English, thinking, wow, I really can do this. I really can go and speak to people in other countries, and it isn't just like, it isn't only these few people here in Spain, So for example, today I went to my daughter's school and did a talk on plastic. We worked together. I was there with my daughter. We were giving this talk, talking about how we can reduce our plastic use and so on and so forth. But then I got home from her school and I went and I spoke to a school in Chile to talk about exactly the same thing. And yet, suddenly realizing this could happen, was very transformative, for my career, but also just like you mentioned, realizing how many people you can reach and how many people you can help. Now, I think this is something of all teachers, whether we wanted to become teachers or be the next Alanis Morissette, or I don't know, whatever we wanted to do. I know a lot of particularly TEFL teachers never thought of being teachers, but suddenly ended up in that boat. And I think, the one thing that we all have in common is we do like helping people.
Exactly. And we like people.
Yeah, and we like people. And maybe a lot of us quite like being up on stage as well.
Definitely.
With their guitar, without their guitar. But yeah, certainly that idea of connecting and helping people. And for me, this door opening to all of these other worlds suddenly is absolutely incredible. I mean, we'll talk a bit about the partnerships that you've had, that you are working on as well. And we'll talk a bit about that. And I've realised as well, working on a couple of similar projects. I speak to teachers in Venezuela once a week. We have training sessions once a week, and the amount that I've learned from them as well, it's just
Definitely.
brilliant. And I do have this kind of bizarre feeling going in there when they all call me teacher, and it's like, no, I'm just Harry. I'm not teacher. We're all teachers here. This is just a
Yeah.
training session. I'm not teacher. I'm just facilitating the training session. So please call me Harry, not teacher. So for
Yeah.
me, it has it's turned teaching upside down, and it's turned for me, as you mentioned, teacher training especially has just been blown wide open, and the amount that I've learned in the last couple of years has been phenomenal. Even as much as Teachers Talk Radio, we speak to people across the globe, and I learn from people in Switzerland. There's somebody here who lives in Switzerland who was a guest. I learn from people in India. I learn from people in Poland. And it just all happened because of that. So
Exactly.
let's swivel back to partnerships.
Okay. Yeah.
So tell us about some of the partnerships that you've had, how they came about, and how they're going.
Well, yeah, I think the first thing really in the partnerships journey is the Prelim project. So the Prelim project is the partnered remote language improvement project, which was mainly the brainchild of an amazing person called Roy Cross, who I'd also like to give a shout out to, who was working at the British Council at the time. I believe he's now retired, well deservedly, I'm sure. And basically, what I think Roy wanted to do was to find a way to make this connection and to help what was a really struggling English language industry in the UK, because obviously that's the industry that I'm a part of. I'm also the secretary of Young Learners English UK, and we were completely decimated. I mean, there was no way of bringing people over to this country. Everything was on hold, travel, everything. I mean, and businesses were already starting to fold left, right, and centre. It was an incredibly scary time. And although we did have things in the UK like the furlough scheme and some areas of the country that were able to access grants, etc., it was a terrible time that will take us years and years, take the industry years and years to recover from. And that came on the back of Brexit, which is now also compounding the recovery.
No swearing. Yeah. No swearing on this show.
I'm sorry to say the B word. I'm sorry. That apocalyptic event that happened, the other one, and in some ways, actually, the young learners side of things. I guess we'll circle back around to that at some point. But the young learners industry in the UK, like summer camps, school groups, that side of it, has probably had some of the effects of Brexit masked by COVID. And now the industry is really, really struggling to get back on its feet because of all of the many challenges caused by the B word and coming out of the C word. So Roy, going back to good Roy, he wanted to do something to help the English language industry. He could see that there were all of these, these great schools that were really, really struggling, and what could he do? And then he saw the potential of, well, we've got this thing called the internet, we've got this thing called Zoom, people are getting quite good at it now. Is there something we could do? So basically they created Prelim. So Prelim is a partnership between IATEFL, English UK, and the British Council. And they found some money and they set up some grants, and basically Prelim 1, you had to obviously apply. It was quite competitive. You had to submit proposals, etc. And for the people who were successful, you were partnered. The English language institution, the UK-based English language institution, was partnered with a teachers association abroad. So teachers associations from other countries could apply. So year one of Prelim, we were partnered. We were lucky enough to win a grant, and we were partnered with PATEFL, which is the Palestinian Teachers Association. So I have quite a long-standing relationship with Palestine. So that had absolutely no didn't feed in at all into us getting Palestine as a country. That was just a kind of a fluke, but it was a really happy coincidence from my point of view. And over 3 months, so from January to March of 2021, we delivered a teacher training course, and it was very much in partnership. So speaking with the teaching association, developing the materials together, delivering the lessons. So that was and in the end, we taught about, I think it was close to 100, somewhere between 90 and 100 teachers, and some really, 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 apart from the obvious benefits of being able to deliver free teacher training to people in another country that wouldn't have been able to access it otherwise, there were other things that came from it. So, for example, we had reports that trainers in the West Bank were able to communicate with trainers in Gaza for the first time ever. They were able to join basically a community of practice. They were able to sort of knowledge share. They were able to share experiences. Also for a country that is in a desperate situation, they were able to have something else to do, something to look forward to, something positive. So there were all of these other things that came out of the course that weren't just explicitly, we've taught you how to use this methodology, or we've taught you this 21st century skill or whatever.
Not just you riding in on your white horse as a white savior, going in and saying, here is some knowledge, it's for you, I would leave now.
Exactly. And this is really, this is quite different to, say, other types of projects that may have run in the past, where it was sort of like helicopter in these, in inverted commas, I'll say inverted commas because we're on the radio, sort of experts who are expert because they live in the UK or because they have English as a first language or whatever other imaginary sort of criteria for being an expert.
The correct passport, obviously, that makes us all an expert in this language.
Exactly. And helicoptering them in and just dropping a load of materials or training sessions on them and then sort of riding off into the sunset, with our expert in inverted commas hats on. So it's very much not...
Those materials being the pre-prepared materials that have been made, usually in the UK by a UK-based people, for a Western audience, and then going, these are just going to go there. We'll send them there. It's fine. It's the present perfect. The present perfect's the present perfect. It doesn't matter where it is.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was, so actually this kind of emphasis on, really developing materials that are appropriate to the context. If we sort of fast forward to prelim 3, which is where we're at now. So there was a prelim 2. We were partnered with Ecuador. Some really, really amazing results from that project as well, in terms of what this topic is all about, democratization of learning, where we actually had, we worked with a smaller number of teachers, but we were partnered with the university, and the teachers were able to get credits. And we had some really, really nice ones, like, with particularly with ladies, which is, I'm quite a passionate feminist. So I'm always very, very keen to find ways to help women get on in the world, and to have better access to all of the good things that they should have. And we had situations where people, for example, were pregnant, but were still able to take the course, even though they were on maternity leave. They were still able to get promotions. They were still able to get pay rises. We had one lady who was pregnant when we assessed her. By the time we started the course, she'd given birth. And by the end of the course, she actually had the baby featuring in her sort of like final summary video.
Oh, amazing.
Which was lovely. And then she still got, and she was actually in the Amazon. Now, when we first saw her online, we thought her backdrop was a Zoom backdrop because it was so impressive. We were like, where did you get that Zoom backdrop from? She's like, no, that's where I am. That's the Amazon. She was literally in
that's
the
my
Amazon.
garden.
Yeah, and the British Council had supplied things like some funds for people to be able to access data, so there wasn't issues, because obviously there are barriers to this kind of online training.
Absolutely.
And one of the key ones being, well, if you can't connect, or if you don't have a device, you can't connect, you don't have a device.
It can be tricky, particularly in areas that, the Amazon, for example, there's, I imagine, quite often rainstorms and stuff like that. So,
absolutely,
being able to join this kind of training session and not have to be on camera and not have to be speaking, to be able to kind of be there and be able to absorb it anyway, but kind of without using so much bandwidth. I've noticed it's been, a real game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that when you can get these kinds of partnered projects where there is a lot of buy-in from the local powers that be, as I said, people can still, you joked a little bit about, can I get a certificate? Whenever
Yeah.
anybody joins a webinar, but it was great in these courses because they could get the certificate as long as they attended the session synchronously, asynchronously. You make a lot of adjustments. You try to make it very inclusive. You try to make it as equitable as possible, so you remove as many of the barriers as you can so that everybody has a fair crack of the whip at being able to achieve the ultimate outcome, which is to become a better teacher, basically. So that was prelim 2. And then about the locally relevant materials, that's the prelim 3 that we're in now. So prelim 3 is a materials development project. We're partnered with Teflon in Indonesia. And it's actually the UK schools, again, very much in partnership, are going to create a body of teacher materials that teachers can actually use with their own students in their own classes. And they should all be completely context specific. So this is probably the closest of all the partnerships that we've worked in terms of really, getting into the nitty gritty of, right, okay, so Indonesia, we're actually doing a project about vocational studies and tourism. What tourist attractions, what exactly do they need to learn? What, even down to what pictures are we going to use? What audio are we going to use? Everything is completely context specific. And that's great because obviously we know that so much of our teaching materials are, the usual talk about your family. Well, if you're from a place where families are different, or it's a war-torn area, or it's a white face talking about a birthday, maybe people don't even celebrate birthdays in that country. Christmas
So,
is classic.
yeah.
I mean, so
Halloween.
yeah.
I hate having to talk about Halloween.
Exactly. I mean, there's so much scope to make much, much better materials, and people need to see themselves reflected in the materials, because then that's how it will resonate more with them. They'll take it on board and they'll learn more, basically.
And a great way to be reflected within the materials is to make those materials, to be a part of creating those materials, be a part of building those materials, and helping people see those materials, and so on and so forth. We're going to talk more about this, don't you worry, because I want to focus in on democratization of learning. But my dog has just seen someone outside, so I'm going to hit mute, and I'll be back. I'm just going to go and tell her to stop that. And in the meantime, just hold on to your hats. We'll be back in just a sec.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
So, I apologise there. My dog, who's actually called Estrella, which means star, saw her nemesis outside, which is called Luna. For those of you that don't speak Spanish, it means moon. So it's strange that they're enemies, because they should be up there in the night sky together. But they're not. They absolutely hate each other. So Estrella just went absolutely, she went bonkers. Anyway, before we shut off there, we were talking about Indonesia, and we were talking about specific materials for Indonesia that were focused there on the actual purpose of learning in Indonesia. And you also briefly mentioned the title of the show, Democratisation of Learning. So I love the title. I think it's brilliant. It was your title, so hats off to you. Hang on, I'm going to put my hat on so I can take it off. Hats
I
off
don't
to
actually
you.
remember saying it, but I suppose I must have. So that's great.
It was
Thank
really
you.
good because when I put the title in, you were like, "I really like that title." I was like,
Yeah.
"Well, that's good because you said it."
I thought you'd come up with it, Harry. That's great. Okay, well, we'll both take some
No,
mutual
it was
credit. You know.
absolutely your idea. So, if you'd like to explain to the learners a little bit about what it is.
Hmm. So, for me, the democratization of learning is just being able to give as many people as possible equal access to education, basically. And this is where I think we can really see that, the internet, for all of its good and its bad, because obviously there are bad sides to it, can really play an instrumental role in achieving this kind of equality of equity of access to opportunities, educational opportunities, and educational the possibility to for lifelong learning all over the world, because so many of the barriers that previously prevented people from being able to access an English language course or a teacher training course have potentially dropped. Now, I think there's still many great face-to-face language academies all over the world, and there is a lot to be said for being able to actually go to a country where a language is spoken. I mean, I've done it, I know you've done it, Harry, in many different countries, and actually have that wonderful immersive experience of being able to not only be in the country but be in a classroom with people from other countries, so you're learning off them, and then you step outside of the classroom door and you go and see Big Ben or the Guinness factory or whatever. So there's a lot to be said for that. But there are also billions of people all over the world for whom that was never an option, and it's not going to be in the future either. So one of the other projects that we've worked on in Indonesia was a really long project, an 18-month project. Ours was called Nusantara Go, and we partnered with an educational charity in Indonesia. So this is separate to Prelim, called Dompet Dwafa SGI. And we actually delivered what ended up being almost an 18-month teacher training course that ultimately directly accessed more than 500 teachers in 8 rural and remote areas of Indonesia. Now, these are people that would never have had the time, because there's so many barriers, time, money. Very often teachers are female. They will have caregiving responsibilities, which will mean that, again, time wouldn't allow them. Women have babies, which can put a bit of a barrier in the road of, it shouldn't, but it still does, of people's professional development. So there's, and then, basically just confidence, because many teachers at the beginning weren't even confident to get online because they were sort of in awe of the fact that they were going to be talking to UK-based trainers, and they felt quite sort of overwhelmed by that. And also, they are English language teachers, but perhaps their own level of English isn't let's say tip top as they see it. I mean, it's perfectly good enough to do what they need to do in terms of their own job, but they have a lot of anxiety around that. So there's no way those people were ever going to get on a plane, and maybe one or two of them could win a scholarship or something like that, but so they would never ever have been able to access the teacher training if it wasn't for these sort of partnered projects where we sort of get beamed directly into their mobile phones with some knowledge of how to do that, and sort of help out, basically.
I think one of the things you mentioned there, sorry to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
I just want to jump on that, is they are English teachers. And often there is that anxiety that they don't have a good enough level. Often some of them have quite a low level of English as well. They don't have the highest level of English, which is completely understandable. If I were to be a Spanish teacher, there would be quite a few Spanish teachers looking at me thinking his level of Spanish isn't that great. So there is that kind of added twist almost to these training sessions, that not only are they getting CPD, not only are they learning about these new and wonderful ideas that maybe haven't even occurred to them, but they're also getting that English input of something that is of a higher level to what they're used to. So maybe they have a kind of a B1, a B2 level,
Yeah.
and they're good at their job. They're good
Yeah,
at
they are.
teaching English. They're good at going into their classes, but
Yeah.
that's the only exposure they ever have to English. Maybe
Absolutely.
that, and they watch Friends on repeat, because
Exactly.
that's what everybody does, isn't it? It's just natural. So maybe there's that kind of that added bonus almost, and there's I've noticed that incentive with a lot of my students, particularly one of the sessions, a lot of the teachers I work with, particularly in Mexico. It was a 10-week course that we did, and at first they were really apprehensive about speaking,
Yes.
except the one who was really good at English, and all she wanted to do was speak all the time, which was great. She was wonderful, but I noticed that it kind of picked up, and they all gained more confidence, and as soon as they had that confidence, suddenly their English level just naturally improved, because it does. As soon as you have confidence in a language, you go up a level almost, just because you've got the balls to go out there and just be like, I'm going to try, and I don't mind if I make a mistake. And I think one of the big things with these courses where, teachers have the opportunity to work with experts like yourself, like your team, in teacher training, it's that confidence it gives them in English as well, not only in, I don't know, let's say lesson planning or inclusion or whatever you happen to be talking about.
Yeah. And also, we were talking earlier about, like, it's a two-way street. I mean, for us as the UK-based team, it was incredible to go into these places, and you really build up a real rapport. And the course that, for example, New Santarago, as I said, the whole course was about 18 months altogether, the whole program. And you build a real rapport, and you get to see inside the classrooms, you get to meet their students, you get to understand more about their lives, their experience of being a teacher, their experience of being a human. And this is also incredibly rewarding, because even if you work, obviously, so my organization, when it was a language academy, was small, but we still met quite a lot of people every year, but it wasn't anything as exciting as this. But again, it's very, very hard to to have the time or the money or the will or whatever to get on a plane and go out to Indonesia. I still have never been to Indonesia. If anyone would like to take me, I'd love to go.
I need to go as well. I have to be on that very same trip for work reasons,
exactly.
only.
Yes, exactly. And so I would never have. So for me as well, there was like a democratization of learning, because I also got to experience that kind of drop in that barrier, and it was just wonderful. And I know I can very much speak for my whole team when I say that it's a privilege. It's really, really a privilege. I mean, very often the students think that, oh wow, they're so lucky to get this course, etc. But we are just as lucky as them to be able to have this kind of like interaction that we would never, ever, ever have. I mean, I wouldn't be able personally to just give up 6 or 18 months of my life and go and teach in Indonesia, because I'm not a 20-year-old backpacker anymore, unfortunately.
Really?
So, yeah, I know. I missed that.
Get your guitar.
I know, I missed it, along with Alanis Morissette. I missed those boats; they sailed. So it was just, so the partnered element of it is really a sort of a win-win-win-win-win. And then from a sort of a, let's say, more like a managerial / business perspective, it has also been extremely interesting, because you get to work. So me as this kind of the overseer, the kind of the manager or the course director or whatever hat I'm wearing on whatever project, I get to work with these other professionals on a very much even, equal footing, and it's such a huge slice of professional development for me, because I have to learn a lot. I can't just turn up and say, right, here we are, we're going to set up a Trello board and we're going to do it like this, and do you know Google Drive, right, Rev? And everything in this folder, because people work in really different ways all over the world. So that's also very, very interesting. yeah, so it's a win-win, really.
There are two other big things that I really love about these sessions. So obviously you get a lot from it as a professional. I get so much from speaking to my colleagues in Venezuela every Monday. I absolutely love them. They're brilliant. But what I really like is their willingness to challenge like materials and so on and so forth. Because we're going in there at the moment. We're talking about lesson planning. And I know as a teacher, I can sometimes, occasionally, be a bit of a door handle planner. You get to the door handle and you're like, right, I'm going to do this. You open the door and you go in with that kind of idea in your head. It happens. It obviously happens. Life happens. Life goes very quickly, and and we're talking about lesson planning. It's great for me because I've been able to improve my lesson planning to beyond often 3 bullet points on a page. But when we talk about a lot of the last session, we talked about interactions in class. So teacher to student, student to student, student to students, student to teacher, and interaction patterns in the class. And we were talking about all these wonderful ideas of what you can do and how you can do it. And then one of the teachers said to me, "But Harry, I have 45 students who aren't even at A1 level. Like, how can I be expected to plan a group interaction there when about all they can say is my name is?" And then on that, how am I expected to go around and monitor, those 10 different groups of 4, like in my class? That's not possible. So a lot of these ideas that are presented to them, they'll say, well, that's not possible. Maybe we could do it this way. We also talked about differentiation and ways to approach, other activities, and the ideas that they were coming up with were far better than within the materials. And it was just like, that's a great idea. We just looked at gap fills, for example, ELT's favorite activity, the gap fill. And we were looking at different ways to do them. And the amount of ideas that we came up with in about 10 minutes, we just came up with all of these different ways of doing gap fills and how that might suit this learner. Instead of putting the word in there, you could put the picture. Maybe you could put a synonym, you could put an antonym, you could put the word in but jumble it up. You could put all of these different, like, you maybe put the first letter, the last letter, all of these different ideas. And there were 2 of the ideas that were there on the book. I guess Luna's walking past again, because there's Estrella saying hello. And another thing, so that was one of the things I love. The other thing I really love is the kind of, I don't want to use an economic term, but the laissez-faire kind of trickle down that comes from it.
Absolutely. So, cascading or trickle down.
There you go. Capacity so we'll go in and we'll speak to somebody, and it has a legacy. It goes on from that. It isn't just us going in and teaching 5 people. It's us going in, sharing ideas with 5 people, and then those people share those ideas. Yeah. And so I'm going to hand over to you now.
No, that's super interesting, because there was just something that popped into my mind, which I think is sort of directly relevant to points 1 and 2, which is something that we learned quite early on, which is that with these partnered online courses, even though they have these live elements, or they're mostly live with sort of asynchronous backup, it's very important that they're underpinned by a really solid community of practice, and some sort of like well thought out platform or forum where people can sort of continue to share ideas. Because if we going back to what you were saying about the classroom with 40 students, or it hasn't been our case, but I know that some of the other UK based training organizations have been partnered with countries where they literally, it's not just low resource, it could be no resource. I mean, I know, for example, there's a school at the moment that's working with a partner abroad where the classroom doesn't even have walls. So it's not even possible to design materials that they could stick on walls, because there are no walls. I mean, that's like a kind of an extremely zero resource context. So again, you mentioned the word white savior. We absolutely do not want to have white savior complex and just parachute ourselves in and go, this is how you do it, and then walk off again. we have to, it's very likely that they have the answers. So what we're actually doing is we have to create the conditions, we have to create the environment for creative thinking, we have to communicate some of the principles of things like creative thinking, critical thinking, in a sort of a very user-friendly way. And then once we've created those conditions, we set up the platform and the forum to allow the teachers themselves to generate their own ideas, because it's very, very likely that, number one, they already have the answers between themselves, and number two, they will just know it far better than we do, because we can't possibly empathize with those sorts of contexts. And I've never taught, so we have a summer school, but it's like 12 to 15 young people per group, and they're all extremely well sort of educated, generally from Western countries. It's a very, very different context. So I do not know really how to do that, how to teach 40 kids in a classroom where they could be all different levels, they could be rowdy, they could have behavioral issues or whatever could be going on. So yeah, it's all about creating conditions, creating the community of practice, and finding the right kind of platform so people can share their ideas, not only during the course, but there's this cascadability element this legacy that will outlive the course. And I think that's kind of, the kind of main principles. Because at the end of the day, lesson planning, they can hop on YouTube and watch any number of people who really know what they're talking about, actually tell them how to plan a lesson, or tell them how to move tables around in a classroom to be able to do monitoring or whatever. But I think our job as trainers in these sorts of situations is as I said, that is to create the conditions for creative and critical thinking, to allow them to solve the problems themselves, which is empowering, because it then builds their confidence, and and then ultimately will make them better teachers of English.
It really will, and just better teachers in general.
Better teachers, yeah.
And like you say, it comes from the teachers themselves that way. It doesn't come from us going in there and saying, do this, because that thing you said about not having walls, a lot of the areas we talk to, they don't have the technology that we're used to in our classes. When things get a bit, when things dip off a bit in some of our classes, we can just be like, okay, let's just jump on YouTube. Let's chuck on a video. I need to chill out. The students need to zone out. Like most classrooms across the world don't have those interactive capabilities. I mean, I even went into my daughter's school today, as I mentioned earlier, and I was using a chalkboard with chalk. Like there was no interactive board in the classroom at all. It was quite mind blowing for me that in 2023, this is the only lower school, the only primary school there is in the whole village, and each year group has one interactive whiteboard that they have to book into to go and see. Yeah. But that's still a privilege. We could still provide them with materials that they could use, that they could put up on the board. But yeah, a lot of the sessions that I know that I work on, I'm sure that the ones you've described yourself don't have those materials. So it goes back to the fundamentals of teaching, those fundamentals of how to connect with your students, how to build a rapport, how to encourage these 21st century skills, critical thinking, and so on and so forth. And we are going to talk about those. We're absolutely going to talk about those in just a moment. So hang on to your hat. We're going to talk about these different. I'm not going to call them 7 C's, but there are C's involved, and we'll talk about that in just a second.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health program will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
So, Nikki, I met you, I don't remember when. It wasn't that long ago, but I met you fairly recently. And we are working on a project together. I've been lucky enough to be working with you, and it has been so far. It's been super fun, I must admit. I really enjoy the way that you do work and the way you approach things and the way you think about these different ideas. Obviously, that's come with the experience that you've garnered over the last few years, and it has been super fun to work with you. The project we are working on involves my passion, obviously.
Yes.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have been like, Harry, come and work on it. Just, hey, Harry, come and work on this for absolutely no reason. Yeah, there you go. You like my hats. I liked yours as well. Just for those listening, Nikki did just have a hat on, which made me feel very much at home, as I am actually at home.
It's actually a Welsh rugby hat for those, just to go back to my Welshness, for those listening.
Yeah, it is a Welsh rugby hat. It's a bobble hat, and it looks nice and warm, which at the moment I don't need. No. But we are working on a project that is... that involves Vietnam.
Exactly.
So how is this project different to other projects that you've mentioned? How is it different, and also how is it similar?
Yeah, exactly. No. First of all, thanks, Harry. It's been a lot of fun. Working with you on the project so far. So we are working on a project with Thanh Nguyen University in Vietnam. The project is called the 7 Cs Teacher Development Project, and as Harry has mentioned, it is based around the theme of climate action awareness. So this is all about bringing climate action awareness into the English language classroom, and the live lessons, which will take place between September and November, will focus on sort of two things. So first of all, we'll be introducing these themes of climate action awareness to the teachers, and then secondly, hooking them around various different language focuses, and then thirdly, talking in a very collaborative way about different approaches and how, and practically as well, about how the teachers can then implement this climate action awareness into an English language classroom. So hopefully the outcome being that the teachers will do what we always want them to do, which is to develop their confidence, to develop their professional competencies, to develop their communications. Here's all the C's. These are the C's coming.
Here they come.
Another C is about things that I'm very, very interested in. So the critical thinking, the creativity. Another C stands for classroom. Another C stands for, obviously, climate action. So by the end of the course, we hope that, as I said, teachers will feel a lot more confident in their own professional competencies, and they will have the tools that they need to be able to introduce climate action awareness to their own students, maybe to their own school cultures as well. So, Harry, we've talked a lot about developing greener organizations, greener cultures within schools that have the tools to be able to start on the journey to being able to do that. So it's different in the sense that this is the first time that we do a course explicitly about climate action awareness, although we do a lot with climate action awareness and the UN Sustainable Development Goals in our summer school, in our junior, which is UK face-to-face based at the Atlantic College here in South Wales. So we already, our whole course is already based around that, but it deals with various sustainable development goals, although of course we know they intersect quite a lot. But this course is different in the sense that it is, we're doing a lot of focus, for example, on plastics. So Harry, I know obviously you've helped us to develop some great materials around single-use plastics. As I said, also specifically talking about like school cultures, how to make them greener. as well as just a kind of a general overview to what is environmental sustainability and why is it important. So yeah, it's really, really, really exciting. It will also bring in things that we've done before. So in Indonesia on our Nusantara Go project, we worked a lot with the 21st century skills. So of course, there's going to be a lot of 21st century skills brought into it. So in that way as well, it will be similar. But yeah, really focusing in on climate action awareness is going to be a first for us. And yeah, well, we've already started behind the scenes, and now can't wait to get started front of house as well. So yeah.
It was really lovely. It was really lovely working with you on this. And the way, like, again, we pivoted when we were deciding what to do. And I loved the way our sessions have kind of ended up. So for those listening, we did 4 sessions working together. And where I would kind of deliver a bit of a workshop, but Nikki and I would also have a chat about the workshop, and we'd talk about these different ideas, and it just has a really nice feel to it. You know, I'm thinking in terms of a teacher, how they would when they go in there, it just feels really nice to have that chat. And what you really have kind of brought to my attention is me being an English teacher. You know, I am an English teacher. I am a climate crisis teacher as well. You really helped me focus a lot onto the language again. So I've kind of drifted and kind of made the excuse of, well, it's a CLIL thing now. It's CLIL because so I don't need to focus on that. But it was really great the way you brought it back to the language as well, because at the end of the day, yes, we're teaching in English. Yes, we're teaching about climate action awareness in this instance. But, you know, students aren't just sponges. They don't magically know what all of the language means. You know, you can't just go in there and talk about things without specifying what it was. So that's really helped me personally refocus, you know, my own teaching in what I do as well, and make sure that, hang on a minute, not everybody knows what all of these words are, because a lot of the words are, you know, new words to I'm doing this in inverted commas, native speakers. You know, a lot of these concepts are brand new to all sorts of people. So bringing this to these teachers who have a B2 level or maybe above a B2 level, bringing these concepts in, it's really important that not only we explain the concept, but we explain the language behind the concept.
Absolutely. And I should say as well, can I just put my hand up here and say that I also learned new words from the tutorials. So I genuinely learned new words from the tutorials. And our academic manager has been busily making glossaries of terms and all sorts of, you know, add-on work that we're going to also integrate into the course, specifically around, you know, a lot of the language, a lot of which is kind of new. And yeah, there's so much potential for language learning from the language of climate action awareness. You know, we were planning part of the curriculum today, in fact, part of the scheme of work, and we're talking about, you know, how there's so much scope for doing a lot of work around syllable stress, because a lot of these words are very long and quite hard to actually know how to pronounce, you know, weak forms and weak sounds. So, you know, even just words like yesterday, actually, I was doing a class and my students were struggling to say vegetarianism, you know, and even the words of environmental, you know, these are very, very long words. So there's so much language you can bring in just to the words themselves. But yeah, I think carbon sequestration was the phrase that I learned. So thank you very much.
There you go. I had a feeling it's you know, like that. I think that's why it's so often called carbon capture, just because people are like, don't want to say that. And but even worse, if they're a journalist, maybe they're like, carbon I'm not sure. I'll just go with capture. It's not an easy word to kind of get your mouth around as a native speaker, let alone as a you know, as a learner of the language. So there's so much scope, and it's one of the things that when I speak to teachers about, you know, learning about the climate, whenever there are always objections. There are always objections because,
Yeah.
as teachers, we love to object about anything new. We like to just do the same old thing every year because that's much easier than doing anything
Yeah.
different. But there are always objections. The first objection is obviously time, because we don't have time. Nobody has time to do anything. I mean, my granddad used to say, time's going so fast, I don't have enough time to change my pants. And obviously he meant underwear. And I said, Granddad, simple choice, just go commando forever. You don't need to wear pants. It's fine. Unless you're a teacher, then you do need to wear pants. Anyway, we don't have enough time for anything. So that's one of the things. It's always about finding the time, finding a way to find the time to get those like learning moments about the environment in there. Another one is then the expertise. The next step is expert. I don't know about the climate crisis. I don't know, how am I supposed to teach about it if I don't know about it? Well, you can learn along with your students. Often, particularly Gen Z and Generation Alpha, who are students of my daughter's age,
Yep.
can help with that kind of thing. My daughter was in with me today teaching, helping teach about the dangers of plastic and so on. And then the other one is, teachers always say to me, but the parents are going to complain that I'm supposed to be teaching them English, but I'm actually teaching them about the climate. And it's like, you're teaching them about the climate using English. You're
Exactly.
using English to teach about the climate, you're using the climate to teach about English. When you open a textbook, it isn't just, this is the present perfect. It's, this is the present perfect with a theme, or,
Mm-hmm.
you talk about
Christmas. No, I was going to say, if people have been using textbooks that have things like Christmas in countries that don't even celebrate Christmas, historically, then it's just a mind shift issue, isn't it? And I think even I was surprised, Harry, and this is one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about our sessions, is concepts that I think people think are quite complicated and multi-layered. They are complicated and multi-layered. Like, don't get me wrong, they absolutely are. But obviously, you showed in the tutorials that you delivered, and also in the materials that you share on Renewable English, that if you break these things down, they can be very, very simple. You have to sort of keep it simple and just think about making small changes and helping people to see that
Yeah.
even a small change will make a big difference. All of those old sayings, but that they're really true. And something as simple as, like you mentioned, things about getting a plant, or starting a very, very low-key campaign, or just getting people to bring in their plastics or whatever, just noticing as well. We talked about noticing the things around us, and just being more aware. I think you mentioned something like, ask your parents, did they hear the birds singing more or less when they were young? And of course, you got past simple right there. Go home and ask your parents this, report back. Past simple, fantastic. Tick that past simple box. So that if, going back to circling all the way back to the beginning and the reports, if at the end of the year the teachers still have to fill in those reports with those horrible, totally non-formative numbers about, did they learn present perfect, they can still tick it, or past simple. Yes, they did. It doesn't really matter that they learned it because they asked their parents, did the birds sing more when they were children, or whether it's because they asked a totally irrelevant question, about a holiday that they never even been on. So,
and it is, again, that comes down to the teacher just paying a slight bit of attention to what they're teaching. You just take that, stop for that moment, because people do want to learn grammar. I'm not a huge fan of grammar. I don't like writing out subject plus verb. I don't like those, particularly with very young learners. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to do that. With adults, maybe it helps because they're used to learning it in their own languages. But drawing those things to their attention and saying, well, that is the past simple, that is, the present simple, that, and showing them where the grammar has been, and showing them where the grammar has come up, it can be super important. Now, I just noticed the time, which is something I haven't looked at for the past hour and 23 minutes. And I've noticed we're up to an hour and 23 minutes of our talk, and we haven't even talked about young learners. and you are involved with young learners. So
Yeah.
you've got 6 minutes and 13 seconds to tell us about young learners.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier on when I was probably going off on a little bit of a tangent about, just how difficult the environment is at the moment here in the UK in the young learners world. We've got this situation now where we're starting to experience a really good demand again for people to come over to the UK and learn English on short courses or summer courses or school groups or, in some sort of form like that. However, we are faced with, absolutely incredibly high barriers around things like travel cards, people not being able to travel on ID anymore from the European Union, groups not being
That's
able
a
to.
pain in the nuts. Sorry, excuse my phrasing there. It
Absolutely.
means my daughter has to have Spanish ID and a passport, which
Yeah.
luckily in Spain only costs €40 combined. Sorry, continue.
I think it's yeah. So and that puts a huge. So going back to the democratization of learning, point. Pre-COVID and pre-Brexit, you would get these huge groups of people that would travel as a school group. Of course, money was always extremely tight. The organizers would always want everything, sort of as cost effective as they could, but not because they were tight, but because they wanted to be able to offer the opportunity to as many of their students as they could, so that you didn't, so if they've got a class of 30 or 40, all of those kids could have a good chance of going, so and it wasn't just, the privileged few whose parents could afford it. And now, on whatever cost you might be able to come up with, if you might have to add on anything from 40 to 80 euros if those kids haven't got passports. So huge problem there. So that the fact that we some young learners, particularly summer schools, used to rely on EU nationals to staff centres for things like activity organisers, pastoral care, by citizens of the European Union. Up to about 50% of staff came from the EU. Of course, we don't have any possibility now of being able to bring over seasonal staff from the EU. So there's a huge recruitment crisis. So that's a massive barrier. Then add in things like, cost of living, and it's a really difficult market to make work at the moment, and it's a real shame. And it's a problem that countries like Ireland, for example, don't have. So the young learners space is struggling a little bit. Nevertheless, there are still some great schools, some great courses. As I've mentioned, we run a course in partnership with Atlantic Experience, which is based at UWC Atlantic College here in South Wales. And we run a program. Our program is called ALEA, English Language Experience in Action, and it's very much a course based around things like the UN Sustainable Goals, and making, English is kind of taught very, very communicatively, project based, and getting the students to actually come in and solve problems and think critically, and to try to work on that kind of change making aspect of education that I know, Harry, you're also very, very passionate about. So
very,
down
very
with Brexit.
fond of that.
Down with Brexit and up with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and
absolutely.
Let's see what the future brings for young learners.
And I do have to say, it's such a shame, because I know obviously there's a huge carbon footprint around lots of people traveling to the UK to study when they could maybe do an online course. Yes, those flights are going to go anyway. Sorry, whether they're filled up with kids who are coming over on these Ryanair flights or just tourists coming over, they're going to fill up. They're going to go, even if they're empty. Those flights are going to go. So there is obviously that side of things which goes against various green aspects. However, the experience that those kids get, it's such an invaluable experience going away from their parents for 2 weeks, to get away and be able to be themselves, be able to not be themselves, be someone else if they want to. They don't have to be who they were in Italy or Greece or Spain. They can go and they can invent themselves all over again and be this whole new person. And that experience, the fact that that's being undemocratized,
exactly,
might not be a word, but I've made it one. It's just really sad.
Sounds good.
So
It is, because young learners in the UK will continue, but my great fear, is it will become a really elitist
Exactly.
thing to do. And
Yeah.
as we've talked about a lot today, everything is a two-way street, everything. So not only do many people lose out because they don't get to have that experience, the UK is also losing out because the soft power that is created by things like people coming over and doing a summer course, really enjoying the experience. They come a few times, not to mention the immense amounts of money that those summer courses pump back into the economy, with pretty much zero taken out from the other side. And, many of those people would have thought, oh, I'd love to go and live in the UK or work, or one day when I have my own business and I'm choosing between doing business with country X or the UK, I'll do it with the UK because I just love the UK because I had a great time there as a kid. All of those sorts of things, that, like I said, that soft power is going to disappear, and the real losers, I think, ultimately will be the UK, and that's really sad. I don't want to finish on a sad note. No,
I know. I can't believe it. I was just thinking, this is good. We've been so positive the whole time, and then suddenly at the end, it has been a pleasure. So on a happy note, I've been delighted to have my anti-penultimate session with you. I'm absolutely delighted. It's been lovely. The time, like the wind, has flown. So it has been wonderful. My dad always says, time flies like the wind, fruit flies like bananas, which is true, and a fun play on words. Thanks for that, Dad. You just made me sound like an old man. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot,
Nikki,
Harry.
it's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, thanks ever so much. I think the amount of 90s references we've used in terms of Alanis Morissette and Friends probably already tells people that we're on our way to the sort of older bracket anyway, regardless of your dad's anecdotes. So
exactly.
But there we are.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Cheers. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. It's been wonderful. We will be back next week, where I'm going to be speaking to people around the world about their experiences as an English teacher. So until then, it is goodbye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.